You're listening to the Speaking Tongues podcast. I'm your host, El Charisse. Each week, I sit down to a conversation with multilinguals where we discuss and celebrate language, life, and culture through our own perspectives. Episode 47, speaking Tigrinya, French, and Portuguese. Hello, language lovers. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Speaking Tongues, the podcast and conversation with multilinguals. This week, I'm joined by Desta, the founder of Languages Through Music, to talk about her language journey through so many languages that I couldn't even fit them all in the title. While Desta has studied and spoken and taught different languages in her lifetime, in this episode, we talk mainly about speaking Tigrinya, French, and Portuguese. I love this conversation because, as I'm sure you all know by now, this show celebrates not just language, but culture as well. So I had a chance to talk with Desta about living in different parts of the world and learning new languages in new places. We talk about taking culture with us as we move through the world, and Desta tells us some of her experience she's had while learning Portuguese when living in Rio and taking part in the big family dynamic while living in Jordan. She also tells what her experience has been like learning Tigrinya and how learning to speak this language has truly become a part of her life. Big thank you to Desta for having this conversation with me. I loved taking this trip around the globe and learning bits and pieces of your story and your travels and your heritage. As always, if you enjoy this episode, don't forget to rate and review the Speaking Tongues podcasts on Apple Podcasts so that other language lovers like ourselves can find the show. Okay, let's chat. Welcome back to another episode of Speaking Tongues. I am here with Desta. How are you, Desta?
I'm good, thank you, Elle. How are you?
I'm fantastic, and I'm so excited to talk to you about all the languages you speak and all the places you've been around the world.
Hey. Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm honored. I'm honored that you have the time, and I know you're really busy, so I will do my best to make use of your time in this hour or so that we're gonna chat. Um,
Yeah, honor is mine.
I like to start each episode with the same question, and that is, what is your first language, and how many languages do you speak?
My first language is English, really, because that's the main family language. But I was born in Thailand. I up until 3 or 4 years old when we then left for Barbados.
Mhm.
And how many languages I speak? Well, English, I speak French and Portuguese fluently, and I speak kind of intermediate Dutch and Spanish, and then basic Turkish, Tigrinya, bit of Arabic. I take about 30 something language lessons a month, so I'm always trying to get better. And there are some languages I understand or took lessons in, but don't really feel confident speaking. So, yeah, I guess about 6 or 7-ish.
That's so impressive. So when you were living in Thailand and you said you speak like baby Thai, did you go to school in Thailand at all?
I did kind of like pre-K, and I had a nanny Thai, and then my sister, my mom spoke Thai. So yeah, Thai was definitely a starter language.
Your language. What was your experience like learning other languages in school? Which languages were you exposed to, or which ones did you have to take, and which ones did you elect to take in school, if any?
They thought it would be better if I stuck to one language in school. So I took French. So after Barbados, we moved to France for a short while so my parents could learn French. And then we moved to Ivory Coast. So I started really when I was about 6 years old with French and continued it through high school. And I have to say, I didn't really enjoy how French was at school anywhere. But I had a really horrific teacher called Madame Camus. She still haunts my memories.
No.
Um, when I was little, she was really mean. She was terrible. She was one of these really scary teachers who'd make you write, 50 lines of nonsense out to punish you for no reason.
Mm,
So I have to say, I really didn't enjoy languages until I was, yeah, 16, 17, because I thought it was always really boring at school, always focused on France and not any of the other 28 countries that speak it.
right.
And yeah, I don't remember any joy in language classes at school. I think maybe that's why I wanted to teach languages and inject some joy into it, because I wasn't feeling it until I kind of made it my own
Hmm.
and started teaching myself through music, making friends who only spoke a certain language, or through my music work. Yeah.
Hmm. And what was that like when you started to learn other languages for yourself outside of that classroom environment? What was like at that point when you were just like, oh, I hate languages. I'm not really into this because of this experience. Like, what made you move forward and want to try new languages with a different approach?
I guess I remember really hearing some music I loved when I was about 16. It was this French hip hop group, um, all over the Caribbean, French speaking Caribbean, and Africa, and they're called Cyan Super Crew.
Mm,
And I just loved their songs so much. So when a friend started helping me kind of go through the lyrics and translate them, and I could sing along with them, I think that was a big click for me.
hmm.
And also seeing how fun and easy language learning could be. Um, then when I moved to Brazil and diving into the culture, and then being really conversational really quickly,
Hmm.
um, yeah, that made me kind of really start to enjoy language learning
Right.
and feel like I wanted to make up for all the time wasted at school. I think if, languages were taught in a nice way at school, we could all come out speaking three languages at 18,
Yeah.
because it isn't because we have multilingual family or travel opportunities that we necessarily connect with the language. If we're lucky, we do, but I think we spend most of our time at school. That's where we really need to make sure it's a fertile learning ground, instead of exams and quizzes and this kind of nonsense way of learning it. For
Yeah.
me, it didn't work, and for lots of people I speak to, they also, spent 12 years on a language and it wasn't working. So
Like, isn't it so weird? Because I don't know about you, but I feel like a lot of people now are realizing how that system has failed all of us. And what took us also,
money back is awful. It's completely awful.
yeah, like what took us so long to realize that this wasn't working? And I really applaud so many teachers like yourself who are, trying to engage their students in better ways and try to prove like, hey guys, it's not really as bad as it was when you were in junior high school.
Yeah, it makes me sad because, so many people I meet, or, friends, like, oh, I'm just not a language person, or, I'm really bad at languages. And most of the time they think that because they were made to feel that way at school,
Hmm. Right.
and they weren't given the kind of support, or, empowered to see that you can actually teach yourself, to a great extent with apps, film.
When you were growing up, was your home with your family, were you a multilingual family?
Well, English was the common language. So even though my parents and my sister spoke other languages,
Hmm.
and we lived in different places, English was the language at home.
Okay. Um, where in your community outside of your home did you see representations of your culture and I guess the languages that um, your family spoke?
Mm, oh, let me think. My family's English and Eritrean and Thai. So sometimes there was a Eritrean community or Ethiopian community. So with Tigrinya and Amharic, there's the same alphabet and some same words, but they're different languages. So I remember in Abidjan, in Ivory Coast, there was a small. In Jordan, there was an Eritrean community. In London, of course, huge Eritrean community
Mm.
and lots of Thai people. Um, yeah, I haven't only spent kind of summer holidays there. Um, and then Thai, I started again this year because I thought during lockdown it would be cool to pick up after so long because I get to every time I go back there in the airport, people look at me not looking Thai and they go, "You were born here?" I'm like, "Yeah." Like, "You speak Thai?" I'm like, "No, I forgot it, sorry." So I thought it would be good to reclaim it. So I've been taking a couple lessons since May. I have a really lovely teacher.
Cool. And I
Yeah.
guess, you've lived all over the world and you've experienced a lot of different cultures and languages. Um, what was your experience like being around so many diverse languages and learning, I guess, as you're growing up, learning to communicate in different ways, moving around when you were a child?
I don't have any comparison, since my mode was always moving around all the time. I don't know what it was like to not
Mm,
have moved around all the time. So for me, I guess my default setting just became observant
mm,
and um, trying to listen well and kind of always being sure I didn't know much. You know what I mean? When you're always kind of like a new person somewhere, you're always like, cool. Like, you just always open. I guess I grew up knowing how different it is everywhere and how differently everybody
mm,
communicates. I mean, there are lots of important overlaps. So I guess it just made me keep an open mind and an open heart
yeah.
and try and communicate as can
Hmm.
and not to judge or interpret anything too quickly if I didn't understand it. So not to make assumptions, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, not to make assumptions.
I think
Just
more
yeah.
people could benefit from that type of understanding of how people really operate and just because I think once you have that experience, you can't help but to move through life in that way, right? Like open-minded, open-hearted, and understanding of differences, right?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I've met people who've traveled a ton who are super closed minded. And then I also met people who've never traveled or traveled, to one country who are super open minded. So I think people turn out either way, but it definitely helps. It definitely makes all the moving easier. I think it would have been impossible if I had, been clinging to a certain mode or way or well, I couldn't. I had nothing to cling to. Like all of my, each member of the immediate family was so different from each other.
Mhm.
Uh, an English mother, an Eritrean father, and a Thai sister. So it was really kind of my whole all the planets in my little personal universe were so different.
Yeah.
I just got used to switching it up. I didn't really appreciate it at the time. It just was, what it was. What? now, yeah, I do. I do. I guess it's made me interested in so many different cultures and languages. That's really what I enjoy.
Yeah. Like I'm really interested in a lot of, well, like every culture around the world because
Hmm.
I don't know why. Like people will ask me like not why are you like this, but people will
I get asked that all the time. Why you like this?
say like, well, why are you so interested in, something, you know, on the opposite end of the world is where you live and everything and especially me because I live in New York City and I feel like people think that New Yorkers the world revolves around New York City, right?
Mm.
Which it does. But
Londoners might disagree.
that's true. I I think that that's just a big city problem. Like we all think the world revolves around our city, but um I've always just, I was born and raised here, but I've always been so interested in what other people are doing in other parts of the world. And a lot of people around me are not like
Mm.
a lot of people just I don't want to say they don't care, but I think that they don't think about it as much as I do. Like I'm always just thinking like, what are people doing in Botswana right now?
Yeah.
Like in Jakarta today. And just
Mm.
like these are just constant thoughts that I have. And I'm always so interested in culture and language is a part of that too, for me. But um I I don't I don't think that I've had an opportunity to study as many languages as I wish that I had,
Mhm.
to like a effective level. But
Mm.
what are some of the things that you've encountered around the world that have surprised you, or things that have stayed with you as you've experienced more of the world, as you've grown, as you've um, you know, as you go about your life?
Things that have surprised me.
Things that have surprised you that you've encountered
Mhm.
about language and heritage, or any things that any things that you've kept with you in your life, like any customs or any habits, or is there like a
Mhm.
phrase that you've always heard when you were living in one place that you just always keep in your mind? I'm always curious about the parts of traveling and the parts of culture that we keep it with us,
Mm.
as we move through the world. I don't think that traveling or living someplace is such a solitary experience that none of that residual good time doesn't stay with us or rub off on us in some way.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, definitely every, I guess, place leaves an imprint, some more than others. It's funny, it wasn't until I moved to London in 2012 that people started asking if I was from Barbados.
Really?
And yeah, I found that really funny because I never thought about it. But when I moved to London, people were like, "Oh, you have a Bajan accent," and no one had ever told me that, or no one had never even thought about that. So I guess some people, at least people in London, think I have some remnant of learning English in Barbados, which is fine by me. I love the accent. I wish I had a thick Bajan accent. I really love it.
I'm a
It
fan of the Bayesian accent too.
is the best accent in the world. You know what? This online movie platform called Online. Well, it started as Cinewax,
Mm.
and now I think it's called Online Africa Film Festival. And I watched a film the other day on Errol Barrow, who was the leader of Barbados, and he dated Nina Simone, which I didn't know.
Mm.
But yeah, it was just nice to get a blast of Bajan accents this week through the film. I guess customs that travel with me are in Thailand. There's a kind of tradition of having, you have there's a lot of kind of ancestor worship, or they have a lot of old Thai houses have rooms that are just photos of the family and incense and prayers and meditation space. And so I guess I like setting up a little spirit house. In If you're in Thailand, you see these houses outside in the yard that are much smaller, and they're for the spirits of the house.
Mm.
So I really like that tradition of kind of maintaining a space to honor your spirits and your family. And I really like that from Thailand. A custom I really like from Abasha, from Eritrean Ethiopian culture, is incense. So it's traditional to burn incense at home.
Mm.
So when I'm traveling, I always take incense wherever I go. Because as soon as I light it up, I feel like I'm home.
Is there a specific scent?
Yeah, frankincense. So like the kind of resin, the proper kind of, it's like milky white resin, and you put it on charcoal.
Hmm.
So frankincense, little rocks of frankincense. Something, a kind of custom or a tradition or part of culture that made a big imprint on me growing up, I think, was living in Jordan between 9 and 13. And I think just genuinely the generosity and hospitality of Jordanian, but Arab culture in general, I don't think as I've ever seen kind of surpassed.
Hmm.
I have a big extended family with my Eritrean cousins, but I grew up in a small, kind of 4-person family setup. So to make friends who had houses full of aunties and uncles and grandmas, and it was just like my best friends in Jordan. I could go to their house at any time without calling. And it didn't even matter if they were there, because if they weren't there, I'd kick it with their aunties and I'd get fed and we'd watch TV. And just I kind of spent so much, probably more time at their house than my house. And yeah, this kind of really warm, loud, loving, feeding culture, I think, is something that I really, really loved. This kind of gathering of family and friends, which is a big part of Eritrean culture. But yeah, I really experienced that in Jordan through my best friends' families. Is always enough food for at least 20 people at any meal time. Like, yeah, I really enjoyed that. Um, that's a part of culture I really, growing up, that really I love. I love the warmth and the sharing of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that that's one thing that I love about spending time with friends who, excuse me, friends and their families who are from cultures other than mine, because like you, it was just four of us
Mm,
in my immediate family, so we did things on a very small scale. I don't think we've ever had 20 people in
mm-hmm.
our home, and we never always had enough for, to feed all of those people if they were to
Mm,
die. So it's just kind of like one of the things that like I dream about is like I'm gonna make friends in like, the Mediterranean region, Middle Eastern region, and I'm gonna get invited to dinner. I'm gonna get invited to lunch because I want to experience this so much. Like I just for not ever having that, you always want what you don't have in a way.
it's so nice. Like after I left Jordan when I was 14, and then I moved to England, and I felt like such a fish out of water, even though I'm technically British.
Hmm.
In Jordan, people will physically fight you if you try and pick up the bill. And then, I moved to England. It was like, okay, you pay 250, you pay one, 3 point, this, that. So it's just like a very different mentality. And it's rare to be invited around to someone's house or to have people over and cook for a bunch of people. Like, I really love that. But yeah, I mean, you carry it, you make it happen anyway, but it's nice to be in a setting where everyone's doing that. I love that. You just go around to a friend's house and kick it. And whereas in the UK or in Europe, I don't know in the States, but it's a little less common than it is in some other places.
Yeah, it's less common here unless it's like a big occasion, like a graduation or a wedding or um, a retirement party. I don't know why those are the examples I.
Yeah, it's just a sign that we need to make more big occasions. And if there's anything 2020 has taught us, is that we should make everything a big occasion.
Absolutely. When you moved to Brazil,
Hmm.
had you had you any knowledge of Portuguese before you moved there?
No, not really. I spoke some French, and I had, which helps with other familiar languages. Um, I'd I think I may have taken like a couple week class or gotten some learn Portuguese books, but no, really. And the first time I went there, had really no clue.
how were you able to navigate that?
Well, I was very lucky to have two amazing flatmates from different parts of Brazil, and one spoke super fast and one spoke super slow.
Mm,
So he was from the north of Brazil, from Belém. And apparently in Belém, people speak really a lot slower. And the other one was from the interior, Minas. And
mm,
she would talk to me like this. So I had like a really great school
mhm.
at home. And I started getting into, well, I love the music. And so it was really easy to dive into the music. And in Brazil, when you look up a song, it immediately gives you the lyrics as well.
Mm,
And also, I found a job pretty quickly teaching English
cool.
and French. And I volunteered. I'm really interested in this Brazilian theater form called Theater of the Oppressed.
Hmm,
And so I wrangled a volunteer internship with them. And so, yeah, in theater, you can't really get around not communicating. So the first month I think was stressful. There were tears. I would come home crying sometimes because, a whole day surrounded in a language you don't speak, it can be exhausting. And I remember watching lots of films. Brazilian cinema is also amazing. So I was watching lots of films with the subtitles Portuguese. It was really full on, just a full on Brazilian baptism. So that's how I got into Portuguese, really. And I think the culture there is so nice and appreciative of anyone trying to learn. French, I'm very happy I speak it now, but still, if I make a le versus la mistake in the post office, I'll get told about myself in public at high volume. But in Brazil, when you speak two words, it's like, oh my gosh, you're a genius, parabéns, congratulations. They really make you want to learn it. So yeah, that was my experience in Brazil. I think that's one of the best moves I made my whole life.
oh my gosh. And you were in Rio?
Hmm.
How much do you love the culture in Rio?
About 1,000 out of 100. Just sign me up. And it was really nice for me too, because coming from my mix up, moving around upbringing, not really being fully from anywhere, it was the first time in my life people would walk up to me for directions on the street instead of my Brazilian friend I was standing next to. Or, people would just be shocked if I told them I wasn't from Brazil.
Mm,
So that was a really nice feeling. I'd never had that.
yeah. Oh, I love that for you.
Yeah, I love that for me too. Why did I leave? Yeah, no, it was really nice. It was really nice. It was really cool. And it's given me so much joy since, because I've been able to teach Portuguese. I've been able to, yeah, just still really immerse myself in the films and the music. And it's just a culture I really have a lot of love for.
Yeah.
That for sure.
I am dying to go to Rio.
It's pretty fantastic.
Does it when you moved there, did it was it everything you thought it would be or was it different? completely different from what you thought it would be?
I guess I read quite a bit about it before I went. Um, there's a great writer called Rui Castro, and he has a book on Rio, which I love. And yeah, it was wonderful for people who live there. Something that can really wear them down. This kind of constant vigilance
Hmm.
you have to have, and police brutality there is mad. And there is a lot of wonderful representation visually, but socioeconomically there's the same racist structures and systematic oppression as anywhere else.
Right. It's like with any place that's beautiful, I think it's easy for someone like me to say, "Oh wow, I really want to go there. It looks so beautiful and the weather and the beaches and the blah blah blah." But I always remember someone saying like about the Caribbean, like, "This is your paradise, but I live here." S-
Mm,
You know, just be mindful of that. And
yeah, definitely. There's
um
a great film on Netflix by a rapper called Emicida.
mm,
I watched it last night. He's from Sao Paulo, and it's brilliant because I already liked his music a lot, but the film packs in so much of Brazilian musical history, especially
mm,
samba and hip hop in Brazil, but also so much of the social justice history in Brazil.
mhm.
Um, it's mind blowing and it's beautifully done. So yeah, anybody interested in kind of Brazilian, especially Black Brazilian, Afro Brasileiro, like culture, pioneers, music, architects, social justice, law. He put so much into the film. It's really beautiful.
I gotta check it out. I'll see if we have it in here in the US.
Yeah, it's on Netflix and it's called Amarelo. Brilliant, 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 brilliant. Yeah, really brilliant. Like nowhere's perfect, but Brazil has a lot of great things, great people.
Yeah, absolutely. So we talked about um well, I've heard you talk about learning Tigrinya before. Uh,
Yeah, Tigrinya, it's a nightmare. I love it, but it's a nightmare.
well, that was my question. I was going to ask you. I was going to first say that I've heard you talk about it at the Sisters Only Language Summit. I've heard you talk about it at Women in Language. But I'm curious to know. Well, you just let the cat out of the bag, but how has the process been for you? And how have you been able to connect to your heritage through this language?
Process has been arduous and hellish and very, very difficult. I guess because I'll give my father a pass. I guess because we were moving around to so many different countries and not all of them had a big community, it was difficult to teach me when I was little.
Hmm.
So it was something I ended up really getting serious about as an adult. So the process has been I've met some wonderful people. The teacher I found in London, who he just recently passed away a couple months ago.
Oh no.
He was one of my favorite people of life. So I found a really wonderful teacher. I met some wonderful people who were studying with me, like including some brilliant writers and music heads. And yeah, so I've definitely made friends. I had a wonderful teacher in Uncle B, I called him. I have a great teacher now who I found on italki, and my family and friends always help me out. I think with Tigrinya it's interesting because Eritrea has this long kind of complicated history with war and with Ethiopia. You have this interesting kind of levels to it. So people who actually learned it there, or people who learned it as refugees outside, or people who learned it from the parents, or people who lost it, people who spoke it and then lost it. So they might speak Tigrinya but have never been to Eritrea.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess it's been tough because the language is not easy, but yeah, I would it's the priority to speak Tigrinya well. My dad was a writer as well. He's a famous poet in Eritrea. So
Mm,
I feel like there's also that extra pressure to come correct. So yeah, it's something I regret that I didn't start earlier or have earlier. Um, but yeah, and most of my family live in the States. So even when I'm with them and visiting them, their kids speak better English often.
mm,
So yeah, I think it's really important to maintain family languages whenever possible. And I know a lot of families, just want their kids to learn English as well as they can
mm-hmm.
and don't worry about the the family language.
Mm,
But I really, yeah, if there's one thing I could change about my upbringing, it would be that I had it from much earlier.
yeah. What particularly is giving you the trouble with the language? Is it the pronunciation? Is it grammar? Is it vocabulary?
Of like, I feel like I should already speak it perfectly, and my dad's a famous poet. I think that adds pressure. But I think everyone tells me my accent's good, and I think that's because I was exposed to Arabic from a young age. It's a Semitic language, so mainly because the grammar is pretty intense.
Mm,
There's like a million ways to say you. Um, the and it's hard to get kind of clear explanations, I feel,
mm-hmm.
um, on certain things, but it's just practice. It's probably one of the more difficult languages I've studied, if not the most.
And your teachers are helping you, so you have plenty of opportunity to make conversation, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess all my family and friends, almost all of them speak better English than I speak Tigrinya, so we almost always end up speaking more English. So yeah, it's about being disciplined, I guess, and making that practice time. And then also when I'm with my teacher, I want to practice more on reading because I want my reading to be faster.
Mm,
And so then I can read a page to her, but then when I have to kind of spontaneously chat, I find that harder.
right, right. It's
Yeah.
like hard to express yourself
Mhm.
on the like when you're not anticipating what someone's gonna ask you. Is that
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah. That's the issue I have with French too. It's like
Mm.
I get it. I don't need to go back to a beginner level, but if someone approached me on the street and just asked me something I wasn't expecting, I
Yeah.
uh
Rewind, please.
how long have you been like when did you start learning Tigrinya?
um I think really as a kid because my dad would say chat sometimes. But I think really seriously trying to learn and read and everything. Probably like when I moved to London in 2012.
Okay.
Yeah, so probably that's when I started being more serious about kind of reading, writing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So you're invested.
I'm invested. I'm in it for the long run. I've already figured out that, Tigrinya is just going to thrash me even if I study it for like another 30 years. So I'm just accepting that it's probably just going to be a lot more
Mhm.
sufferation until I can feel I speak it well.
Yeah. Well, that's good. I mean, it's a lifelong relationship you're gonna have with it. So
It is. I mean, all languages are. I think, all these things on YouTube where it's like, learn this language in 2 minutes. I'm like, what's the point of that? Like, you never really stop learning anything.
yeah.
So they never appeal to me, those ads. So I'm like, it's okay. Well, I shouldn't say this in 2020, but I still have time.
When did you start making the connection between languages and music? I guess what were some of the pivotal moments when you started making that connection and wanted to start teaching languages in that way?
For me, really, the first moment was when I was about 16 and I discovered music in French that I really liked.
Hmm.
And then moving to Brazil, really being amazed by how, through discovering Brazilian music I loved, I was able to learn Portuguese really quickly
Hmm.
and enjoyably. And then I think a moment that really surprised me was when I had gig doing backing vocals for a Turkish artist,
Ooh.
and I had to learn 20 songs in Turkish. And I was just really stunned by how, if you learn 20 songs in a language, that actually gives you a whole lot more than 20 normal language classes.
Hmm.
Because you have to wrap your head around the pronunciation, the grammar, and really to be able to sing something well, you really need to understand what you're saying.
Right, right.
Um, I mean, I have friends who can fake it beautifully, but for me, when I have a job and I have to do backing vocals, or I really have to understand the words well enough. Well, one, not to have to look at the words, you have to memorize it,
Mm.
and then, yeah, to know what emotion to put where. I had my first language to music course in London in 2014. So it's almost 7 years that I've been running workshops or classes for languages to music.
What are some of your methods and what are some of your students like? I guess, do you have students of all ages and, what are some of their reasons for wanting to learn through music?
Well, methods are really simple. So lots of kind of all based on songs, but really giving people keys to the songs before we listen, while we listen, really focusing on key phrases, keywords. And I'm a very visual learner. So, I need lots of colors and pictures. I need to watch the music video. I need a playlist because audio really helps me learn. So, yeah, I guess I try and make the experience kind of really a surround sound situation.
Hmm.
And also, I try and take all this stress out of language learning.
Yeah.
People, especially if they're coming to language learning fresh out of the bad memories of high school or uni, they can feel a bit nervous about approaching a language, or if it's their first language outside their mother tongue.
Hmm.
So I try and make it the Madame Camus' French classes were for me as a kid in Abidjan. What are some of my students like? A huge range, different ages. Some are musicians or into music. Some have specifically come to me because they're not into music, so I think it'll be some successful kind of
Hmm.
shock to the system. And also that they'll discover people that they've never heard of. Um, I think a lot of the people that come to me have an interest in travel,
Hmm.
because I kind of try and take students to lots of different destinations in the classes. So, if we're doing Portuguese, we'll do songs from Brazil, but also Portugal and Angola and Mozambique and Cabo Verde, and I really try and cover all the places that the language is spoken.
Hmm. Before I forget, tell us where, those of us who are listening, tell us where we can find you and where we can find you online. And if anyone wants to reach out, what would be the best way for them to do so?
Well, I am languages through music on everything, I think, or Lang through Moose on Twitter, but I don't use Twitter very much. But yeah, at languages through music, it's for all my language to music stuff, and any music related stuff I usually put on Desta on any platform. So yeah, I'm pretty pretty responsive anywhere. So Instagram, yeah, it's probably where I get a lot of messages, or via the languages to music sites. But yeah, if you go to my either of those, you'll find me.
Awesome. I will add your information into the show notes as well.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely. And I'm so happy that you had time to have this conversation with me. And I really enjoyed
Oh,
you and talking about your journey and your journey around the world, your linguistic journey around the world. Um, Thank you for sharing that with me and with all of my listeners.
well, thank you so much for inviting me, Elle. Really, it's nice to be reminded of the travels, considering I've been the hermit of all hermits for the past 9 months.
I think that we can all
Yeah, commiserate.
I have one more question.
Sure.
Last question that I ask at the end of every episode.
Hmm.
Do you have any jokes, popular sayings, tongue twisters, cool slang words, idioms, words of wisdom, or advice? And bear with me because this is a list you have. Any of those in French, Portuguese, Spanish, Dutch, Turkish, Amharic, Tigrinya, Arabic, or Tagalog to share?
Let me think. The first one that comes to mind, I guess, is just Brazilian slang I say and hear all the time. So basically, when something's cool, the word is legal.
Legal.
Legal. And that literally means legal. So I always found it really funny when I moved there. I was like, legal, legal,
Legal.
legal. Yeah, legal. Everybody says legal.
I like that one.
That's that's my favorite one. There's also I don't know if this was part of the languages you named, but something that I can't get rid of. It's from Amharic and it's inde,
Indeed.
inde, and it's a really multi-purpose word. It can be used like when you're irritated with someone, or you're like surprised, or you're angered, or you're like a friend's teasing you. "Inde?" It depends. It can be kind of different lengths, different tones.
Mhm.
And yeah, my family use that a lot because a lot of my family speak Amharic. And then little kids pick it up. So my little godson in Atlanta, if he's irritated, he'd be like, "Inde?" with his little baby voice. It's really funny. It's really funny. So those are the first two that come to mind. Legal from Brazil, I use a lot, and then the multi-purpose Amharinya.
I love it.
There's a really great saying in Turkish that I can't. I'll have to get back to you on it. But it's a really funny saying. I think it must come from like ancient trade routes and stuff. But if someone thinks they're special, there's a saying, and it's like, "What do you think you are? Special Indian fabric?"
Huh.
So it must have been, it must have been when special Indian fabric was the rage in Istanbul.
Yeah.
But yeah, I have to look that one up.
If you find it, let me know.
Yeah, so those. India is probably one of my most used words, sounds in life.
I like that one.
Yeah.
I like a good like catch-all phrase that um kind of fits a number of different circumstances. It's okay
Yeah,
to have in your pocket, I think.
yeah. And some just always stay in your mind,
Mhm.
whichever language you're using.
Yeah. Well, Desta, it's been a pleasure chatting.
For me too.
I'm so happy to have had you share your experience and talk about languages through music with me and with my guests. In the first language that you can think of, don't think too hard.
Hmm.
What's the best way to say goodbye?
The best way to say goodbye. Ooh, I kind of like. In Portuguese, like when people say goodbye of tudo de bom, which is like all good, like everything good, wishing you everything good. Tudo de bom.
Tudo de bom?
Yeah.
Tudo de bom, Desta?
Tudo de bom, amiga. Thank you so much for having me.
Obrigada.
And obrigada você.
I'll be talking to you soon.
Awesome. Oh, thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.